Hi everyone, Dex here from Redstack. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, BIM for MEP, Design and Detailing. We will have Tomislav from TechNexus presenting for us. So just a quick introduction about Redstack. So we're a leading provider of design technology and services to engineering and architecture professionals. With over 20 years of local experience, we provide the expertise, training and support to help companies realize the full potential of the design technology. The Redstack mission is to deliver industry-leading services to the engineering, construction and architecture communities. We work with clients and companies of any size nationally and abroad. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Dexter, and thanks everyone for joining us on today's webinar. I guess before I kick off, I just wanted to introduce myself, and as Dexter said, I contract to Redstack, and I do help with technical webinars like this and any other issues as well. I do training. I've been in this industry for over 20 years now. I basically started as I left high school, did a civil engineering course, and then ended up in a whole bunch of companies. So you can see there I worked for Worley Parsons, GHD, Oricon, Boeing, and basically did anything that was to do with CAD. So whether it was civil, infrastructure, piping, structural, electrical, telco, medical. The work that I did with Boeing was out at RAF at the Amberley Air Base, and in their city office doing some submarine work. And then eventually ended up at Autodesk for 8 years as a pre-sales tech specialist. So if you've been watching or keeping an eye on some of the Autodesk social media things over the last 8 years, you've probably come across my name with some of the videos, and then even more so just recently on LinkedIn as well with my own videos. Now, I guess also just before we jump into today's webinar, it's really just going to be talking about BIM for MEP design and detailing. So I guess everyone on the call would have some sort of interest in regards to doing MEP. So whether it's in the AutoCAD based products like Fabrication CADmep, or even inside Revit, in the MEP space, this will apply to you. Towards the end of it, I will show live workflows between Revit and the fabrication products. But ultimately, if you do need more information, then I'd suggest to get in touch with whoever it might be that you deal with at Redstack and ask for something a little bit more bespoke in regards to, whether it's just an on-the-phone discussion or an in-person, live demo and a chat about some of the things that we covered today, which also might lead into, talking about other products, things like Navisworks and point layout and that sort of stuff, which we'll gloss over today. So, what is BIM? So, you might have heard the term bandied about. In my mind, BIM has been around for a long time, particularly in the piping industry, because we were using things like PDS back in the day, and obviously that's translated into other products, but even more so recently with BIM being spoken about a lot, I guess with anyone who does deal with the Revit side of things. And again, it can help improve project understanding and decision making in it as well, because we are doing the design, build and operate in this sort of single source of truth kind of model. BIM is not Revit and Revit is not BIM. Don't get that confused. The whole idea of this is sharing and using that same consistent data across the whole project life cycle. So we can start our conceptual sort of modeling within Revit, and then take that Revit project and run it into the more detailed design of the project, and then even ultimately we can reuse that model in the actual building itself, so for facilities management. So again, you might hear sort of the buzzwords, the IoT, the Internet of Things. So again, having various sensors and whatnot on that in that building, and we can relate all of that data back to the BIM model as well. And then even ultimately, it's responding to changes as well during the design phase. So not only just using Revit, but things like the other Autodesk tools like BIM 360, where we can have all of the different teams, spread out around the world, and then that way using that single source of truth in the cloud to get better knowledge and information on that model and get it in a more quicker fashion rather than trying to email files back and forth. That's the whole idea of the process of using Revit and the cloud in there as well for better change management. So some of the changes in the MEP industry as well. So, things like the owners are realizing the benefits and associated, savings, which does lead into things like discussions about BIM mandates. And it's not necessarily, you might hear, things like overseas in the UK and Singapore mandating BIM. And I know, we are talking about it locally. The explosion of data in the projects and talking about what LOD we need for these models. So if you have a look after this webinar, look up LOD for Revit or even just for BIM, then you see the different values depending on whether you want to model in part of a structure or part of an MEP, a pipe run or a duct run, and then whether we need to get down to the level of detail of things like nuts and bolts and that kind of stuff as well. And then also as well, in regards to this, like I said before, the ability to collaborate across distances, which might be offices in the same city or even across geos as well. So some of these trends that you will see or are seeing are sort of getting the engineers to extend their services downstream and the fabricators to extend their services upstream. So, and again, it's just promoting the collaboration and the communication between all of the different various groups. And I know today we're talking about just sort of MEP kind of things, but in every project there is always going to be services plus the structure plus architecture trying to knock out the building or project as quick as possible. So again, the use of Revit in particular and cloud collaboration, if you need to, is going to help expedite that as well. So some of the challenges, disconnected workflows. So having different groups using different tools as well. The inability to engage early or influence early. So again, it's just maybe getting in too late once important decisions are made, and then you're sort of left with, I guess, the software or the workflows that you have. So just trying to get in as early as possible and have these discussions about who's using what products, where they're located, and try and help streamline things. So some of the other challenges as well. So fast-tracked project schedules, and I'm sure we've all come across this, is where everything needs to be done yesterday. So it's not going to necessarily resolve a lot of that, but it is going to help when you do sort of get into these kind of workflows and discussions. So some of the benefits of BIM for MEP, so connecting design to detailing to fab and to the field for installation and construction, and this is something that we'll cover a little bit later as well. Meeting any BIM requirements, so whether it's mandated by the project or by a local government body or whatever, you're going to meet those requirements. And again, collaboration, so collaborating more effectively with stakeholders on the project by using a common authoring platform and, if possible, the cloud as well. So looking at the Autodesk BIM solutions, so from the concept phase, so we can still create these intelligent 3D design models during the concept phase. And one of the important things as well is, I guess, if you're the kind of group or personal project where you are going to be doing a brownfields kind of job or an existing site, so capturing existing conditions and importing those point clouds to Revit using Recap. Analysing the building performance directly from the Revit model. So if you're not familiar already, then Revit does have some analysis tools built into the product, so you don't have to jump in and out to do that. And automating design workflows and services layouts. So having a look at different designs early on, so then that way you don't get caught behind the 8 ball as you get into the design and detailing phase, and basically having to come back around and redo the same thing over and over again. So capturing the existing conditions. So if you're not familiar with it, Recap is a tool that's part of the AEC collections. We can import point clouds from a laser scanner. So ultimately, you place this laser scanner in the middle of the room and you just press a button, it spins around and it shoots lasers out to where it'll hit something, and then that laser bounces back and it's recorded as a point cloud. And you can see there on the screen that we do have some pipe work that has been captured there, and also even reverse modeled as an as-built model. So then that way, if we are adding cable trays or ductwork around that, we can easily find the clashes utilising Navisworks as well, obviously, before anything happens out on site, because you don't want to get stuck with a cable tray running through a pipe and then having to decide, which discipline brings out the gas axe and has to cut bits and pieces to cut and shut, parts of the project. So if you are doing existing buildings or projects, then do have a think about getting a laser scan done. So this is just a short video talking about scan to BIM. So what we're going to have a look at, this is Recap, so you can see that it has captured an existing building there, and we can create regions from that, and then we can ultimately bring that into Revit, and you can see there that we can align levels and cut sections through that point cloud to see exactly what is happening out there on site. And even though this is sort of shown as an architectural kind of model, it's very important in regards to any project really, MEP, structural, or even architectural, to see what is happening out there on site, and then we can measure from those points on that point cloud, and then get a better idea on where we can and can't run certain cable trays, piping, structural elements, or architectural elements. So during the design phase, we can use Revit to model to a high level of detail, but ultimately, you will determine that at the beginning of the project which LOD you use. We can, and again, using Revit, we can solve design challenges using the tools, and we can even use things like Dynamo to automate some of the more tedious tasks within Revit there as well. So Dynamo is included in the AEC collections. It's sort of a visual programming tool where you just drag and drop nodes. You can read the Revit model, make changes, and obviously update models as you see fit. So if you are doing a lot of sort of tedious work, then do have a look at Revit as well. And then towards the bottom of that list, and I did talk about it just briefly before, about using Navisworks to bring a whole bunch of disciplines together. So within Revit, we do have architectural, structural, and mechanical, but if you are using something like Civil 3D as well to maybe do the car parks, then we can use Navisworks to bring the civil model together with the Revit file and then run clashes on everything, and then determine the clashes before anything happens out on site as well. So improving the design coordination. So utilizing BIM allows better coordination with the designs and the extended project team. So using, and obviously, like I said before, utilizing Navisworks Manage, which is in the AEC collections as well. So we can combine the design and those construction files from various file formats. So if we are using a recap scan plus maybe inventor mechanical models, plus Civil 3D, plus Revit, we can bring that all together inside Navisworks and collaborate and review the clashes, like I said before, anything happens out on site as well. So this is just a quick little video showing the MEP of a project, and you can see it does get quite large. You can, if you need to, I guess, break up the model into various disciplines and areas as well. But you can see here we're going, we can export to Navisworks as well, and also run a clash detective. So you can see we've got clashes already defined there, and then we can also define which model elements clash against other model elements as well. And there are certain rules there too that you can set up just so you don't get double clashes or something that's sort of within its own model as well. But ultimately, I'm a big advocate of Navisworks for any kind of project. Just having it running on a second screen and loading models whenever you need to, and then finding those clashes before, like I said, anything happens out on site. And you can see that clash 5 looks like there's a bit of a pipe clashing with possibly looks like might be some cable tray or ducting in there. So again, we can determine in the office what we want to do with that before anything is going to happen out on site as well. And then once we get into the detail side of things, so the Revit users can create these detailed models, but this is something I'll go through towards the end of this webinar, is we can bring all of these models into something like Fabrication CADmep to produce spool drawings if you need to as well. So Revit can create views and I guess sections of the model, but the whole idea is to produce fabrication drawings out of that. So utilizing something like CADmep in the AEC collections to generate your spool drawings, which we can then ultimately send out to something like CamDuct. So if you are using Revit MEP for ducting, we can send it to CADmep and then ultimately into CamDuct and have it all nested, and then you can send that out to the machine for cutting as well. Sorry. So this is, again, you can see here, and this is what I'll go through in a second as well, just having a look at the more detailed sort of fabrication elements that you can do inside Revit. So Revit by default does have some basic obviously ducting and piping and that sort of stuff, but if you are going to be using it with fabrication CADmep and ultimately CamDuct, we can use those same libraries across all of those different packages to get ultimately spool drawings and fabrication data out as well there. And you can see there what we do in Revit. So create the fabrication ready model and get some clash detection coordination going within Navisworks. And then ultimately you can see on the right hand side there using Fabrication CADmep to look at all of the individual parts and then sending it to something like I said, CamDuct for nesting, or even within Fabrication CADmep to create any spool sheets that you need to as well. And here's just a case study of a local company here, A.G.Coombs. So they're talking about that they were the main contractor working on the CSL pharmaceutical project here in Melbourne, collaborating using Revit and BIM 360 as well. So they were using Estimate for estimating, Navisworks for coordination. They were doing LOD 400 models, and then using CamDuct to create, all the necessary parts required for the project. So you can see the, some of the numbers there: 0 duct wastage through those connected workflows. Project cost savings assisted by prefab, and 0 clashes in the field because they found all of the clashes in the office before anything happened. And then lastly, this is just a little bit more detail about the fabrication CAD MEP side of things as well. So if we just switch over to here, we can also utilize point layout. So we can create points in the model, we can send them out to site, and we can compare the points from the model to the points in the site as well. But I think I'd rather just sort of jump into a live demo and then just show you how it all sort of ties together. So I'm just going to fire up Revit. So what you can see here is I've already started a bit of a duct model, but what you need to do to get started with the fabrication side of things, so if you're using Revit, and this is Revit 2020, so up under the Systems tab, there is a button called Fabrication Parts. So when you do click on it, and when you first click on it, there won't be any parts in here, so you'll have to come down and click to Settings, and then from here you can determine which fabrication configuration there is, and Revit being Revit, you do get the option for imperial or metric, and obviously I've utilized the metric content. And then some of the metric content you can see here, we've got ductwork, electrical piping, ABS, polybutylene, PVC, threaded, welded, all that sort of stuff. And I've just decided to go with duct board. And once I clicked on OK on that, I am presented with the palette here for the duct board. So all I need to do is start placing these fabrication parts. And then if I need some elbows, you can see we can just go through and start selecting those in there, and then we can start generating our model. So you can see I can do this from my 3D view. I can look at it from the ground view, the level. If I switch to one of the elevations, you can see that I've got it there at level 0. Obviously, you will just model it to whichever level you need to, but just for this exercise, I've just got it there on level 0. Now, part of the process means there is a Revit extension for fabrication, so just make sure that you have that selected. So what you can do is go through and select all of those elements, go back to your add-ins, and then we can export that job file out. Okay, and it's told me that 6 parts were exported. And then what I can do inside Fabrication CADmep, so it just sits on top of AutoCAD, and you do get some modeling tools in here, so I can even start modeling in here and send this back out to Revit. But for today's exercise, we're just going from Revit into the fabrication. So all I need to do is open the job. And then you can see here that the viewer tells me what is coming in. So I can see that everything that I've modeled inside Revit or wanted to send to the fabrication side of things does come up, and you can see it's all located in here. And if I double click on something, then you can see that that element has come in, and it has the smarts with it as well. So if I do the same with that elbow there, then you can see we've got all of the values. So it just means that you don't have to turn around and remodel. And this is the whole idea of having this one sort of single source of truth and the ability to send it out from Revit to CADmep, excuse me, and then sending that ultimately to CamDuct, as we spoke about with that A.G.Coombs case study there as well. And then what we can do is we can send this out to documentation. So I don't have a setup here, but this is how we would create the spools, and then we can create spool drawings and go through and annotate, and obviously send that out to the fabricators as well. So, and this is, and like I said before, this is purely going from Revit to fabrication, but we can also do the opposite as well if you need to. So if you are dealing with people who are using Fabrication CADmep on a project and you need to reuse that data, then do have a sit down and chat with them and have a talk about how you can reuse it rather than having to remodel. And then just to finish off lastly as well, so this is just a sort of an overview of some of the solutions for MEP that do come from Autodesk. So for conceptual design, you know, we can use Revit, but we can use it with Recap 360, Insight 360, AutoCAD, and Dynamo. So if you are a bit of a have a coding background, and do have a look at Dynamo to help with the more tedious tasks of the design phase. And during the design phase, we'll also talk about utilising Navisworks Manage and Autodesk CFD, I guess, if you really wanted to. And Revit, so you can see Revit spans from concept right up to fabricate and install. And during the detailing phase, you would be looking at using CAD MEP, like I just showed you, and then CADmep as well for the estimating side of things. And then lastly, once we get into the fabrication side of things, all of that information from Revit to CADmep to CADmep, and it will go into CamDuct for the nesting and unfolding of any parts that you need to in there as well. But for cloud solutions, we do have Autodesk BIM 360 Glue, BIM 360 Build, and down the bottom there, Design and Docs as well. So to have single cloud storage, I guess, for all of the models, so you don't take up local space there as well. And then lastly, in there is Point Layout. So some of these products are outside of the AEC collections. So do have a talk to the guys at Redstack, and if you do need more information, then you can, I guess, ask for me through them as well. And I'm more than happy to have a talk about all of the packages that you see there on the screen, whether it's from anything from something like Recap right down to something like BIM 360 Docs, and then hopefully it's going to help speed up some of your workflows. So that's really it from me. So I will hand it all back over to Dexter.
Well, thanks again for joining us, everyone. And if you have any more questions, you can contact us via email at solutions@redstack.com.au. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.